Today's video is about Jyotisha or Vedic Astrology and how Jyotisha or Vedic Astrology is not just a divination tool. It's also a tool that can really look in the life of a person what's coming up. Today, I'm going to show you something very specific, and I'm going to give an example that I really know because it's my example. We're going to work with my chart, and more specifically, I had some issues with mobility. I knew about it. It's amazing how by studying my chart, I was like, wow, that was coming up. I had lower back issues for a long time now, but I'm doing something about it. I've changed my diet. I've changed my lifestyle. I do a lot of movement that will support and take care of my lower back. So let's look at the chart. But before we do that, something that I always do when I work with a chart, I always invoke the planets, or as you're going to see, I call them the graha. Graha in Sanskrit is the terms for planet, but actually it's mean to seize, to grab, because planet actually look at us and they have a power upon us. And that's exactly what I'm going to explain, with my chart today. So let's invoke the planet so they'll be with us. Oh. Adityaya cha Samaya Mangalaya Budaya cha Guru Shukra Shanibhyascha Rahave Ketave Namaha. So now that we are in, let me explain you a few words. First word is graha that we use for planets. So you're going to hear me referencing to the planet as graha or planet, and there's 9 of them. And 2 luminaries, the sun and the moon, and 5 what's it called taragraha or visible stars, and they are Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn, and 2 shadow planets that are actually the intersection of the ellipse of the sun and the moon, and it's the north node of the moon, Rahu, and the south node of the moon, Ketu. It's a very technical things right now. Don't worry about that. Then you're going to hear the word bhava, and bhava means house, but bhava means actually state of mind, state of being, and that's where we're going to have the different placement in the birth chart with different meaning. The third word that I want to clarify is the word rashi, or referred as constellations, and they're the same as Western astrology, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, etc. Lagna refers to the first bhava, then Chandralagna refers to the bhava, the house where the moon resides. Suryalagna refers to the bhava, the house where the sun resides. And finally, Lagnesha, or lord of the bhava. Each constellation has planets that rule the constellations, and that's something that's very important. But we're going to see that, and it's very easy to understand. All right, so here's my birth chart. It's actually a picture of the time of my birth. So if we look at the graha, the planets, so you can see that the sun here, moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, and Rahu and Ketu. And that AS is simply the ascendant. So at the time of my birth, that was actually the ascending rashi, or the ascending constellation. Number 8 is the constellation of Scorpio. This is the first bhava, the second, the third, and you can see that it's returning here 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10, 11, and 12. When we are talking about the rashi, or the constellation, we are using number as well, and that's why it can be a little bit confusing. And 1 here is actually Aries, that's Taurus, that's Gemini, that's Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. And there's another concept too that, I want you to be familiar with, is what we call the dasha sequence. And the dasha sequence is a period of time that people go through, and everybody is different. So I went first through my moon dasha. What does that mean? imagine a stage and you're going to go and see the singer. So there's a lead singer. The lead singer is at the forefront of the stage and you have the backup singers. And sometimes the backup singers will come and play a role. Imagine during your life, there will be different leader at different moments. So for me, for example, if I started with the moon as the lead singer, after that, 1981, so I was 6 years old when Mars became actually the lead. And then in 1988, Rahu became the lead. And then in 2006, Jupiter became the lead. And then in 2022, Saturn became the lead. And the next change for me now is going to be in 2041. But don't think about it too much. But I want to show you today specifically how did I determine that mobility was something that I had to work on. And there was some sign very early in my life that, I should really take care of that. So here is the things. When we look at mobility in a chart, we're going to look at the planet Saturn. We're going to look at 3 different areas and 6 different patterns. So the first one being the Lagna. So I told you the Lagna is the first house of the horoscope, and we're going to see if there's any relationship between that house and Saturn. The second one is going to look at the Chandralagna, meaning the house where the moon is residing. And then you're going to look at the Suryalagna, where the sun is residing. So let's go back to Saturn. Saturn is here, and I can already tell you that Saturn is quite powerful. Why? It's just because it's retrograde. So at the moment of my birth, Saturn was retrograde in the sky. Saturn is a slow-moving planet, so it can be retrograde for quite a long time. But retrogression is like a sort of power, an exaggeration, we should say, actually. So we already know that Saturn, number 1, is quite powerful for me in my chart. Saturn is going to look 3 bhava away, 7 bhava away, and 10 bhava away. What does that mean? It means that Saturn, placed in here, has obviously some power in that house, but it has some power 3 away. So 1, 2, 3. That bhava, for example, is going to be impacted by Saturn when Saturn is going to be at the forefront. 7 away, it means that bhava in here, it's going to be impacted by Saturn, actually. And 10 bhava away, it's here. So we know that bhava, the 5th bhava, is going to be impacted by Saturn as well. All right, so let's come back to how I determine, the possibility of, problem with posture, problem with mobility. So we're going to look at, the impact that Saturn has on the Lagna, Chandralagna, Suryalagna. If we look at based on just the house itself, we know that Saturn is not overlooking in here. We're good. Saturn is not overlooking in here. We're good. Saturn is not overlooking in here. We're good. But now there's a sort of like details that we need to know. We need to know who is the ruler of that bhava, Lagna. So the Lagna is in Scorpio, and I know that the Scorpio ruler is Mars. So I'm going to look at Mars, and I'm like, is there any relationship between Mars and Saturn? And the answer is yes, there's quite a big relationship because Mars actually is in the rashi of Saturn, is in Capricorn. So that's a sort of like a hit. I also know that Mars being with Mercury in here, Mercury has a very special relationship with Saturn in my case because Mercury is in the rashi of Saturn and Saturn is in the rashi of Mercury. So automatically they have a virtual exchange that happen. So I know that Mars is really impacted by Saturn in my case. All right, so that's kind of like one hit, but quite a big one. And then I'm going to look at the moon. And the moon is in Virgo, and Virgo is actually owned by Mercury. And we just determined that Mercury had a really close relationship with Saturn. So that's the second hit. And then we're going to look at the sun. And the sun is actually in the constellation of Aquarius, owned by Saturn. That's a third hit. When you have more than 2 of the 3 hit, plus some intensification, I would say, likely it means that I might have some issue with mobility. And how I will determine that? If you were coming to see me, I would ask you some questions. So I'm going to show you how, in my case, I have determined when actually the sign that mobility could be an issue and how it could impact. So let's look at the more dynamic way. So it's still the same picture. I was born during the Moon Jupiter dasha. Moon being the lead singer, Jupiter was actually the backup singer that was closer to the lead. And then in 1976, you can see that the Moon was the leader, but Saturn, who we know has an impact, on mobility, or can, bring some issues with mobility, is the backup in here. What I know in my life is that during the summer of 1976, I was a year and a half old, and I have four brothers. Some of my brothers took me for a ride in the stroller and played with the stroller. And I know, because the story has been told, that they kind of like dropped the stroller in a ditch. So it might have affected my mobility, maybe not. But anyway, babies are very flexible at 1.5 years old, but, might have an impact on it on mobility. The second thing that I know is that in 1984, so now Mars is at the forefront, and there's a bigger impact. Mars is in the rashi of Saturn, and there's that virtual exchange that make it more powerful on Mars. So in 1984, my brother, 13 years older than me, so 9 years old, he's 22, he had a new car, and I went with him in the car, and we had a car accident. Bad enough that the car was completely destroyed and we both were fine. No break, no nothings, but that might had an impact on posture and stuff like that, because for all the years that's going to follow, I have some little things happening, with my knees, with my lower back, the sciatica a little bit, stuff like that are showing up during all my teenage years. All right, so let's move on. Now we're going to go in 1993. I'm 18, but I just finished high school. I'm going to university, and to pay for university, I'm working in restaurants. And during that time, I had multiple moments where I suffered from lower back issue, sciatica. I was not doing much exercise because, I was busy, studying, and I was going to, but I always had some kind of like hits that was saying like, you should really pay attention. So now move on to Jupiter Saturn 2008. So 2008, I'm a nurse. I'm working in hospital, and I've started a new job, and I'm traveling a lot, and that's going to just amplify. And you can see that it's a different relationship, but Saturn is kind of like showing up. So I have more of these problems. So I have to pay attention, started to go and see the chiropractor, started to pay attention to movement and being like, okay, prevention is really something I should pay attention. Moving up to now in 2022, Saturn really became at the forefront. Saturn is the lead. So Om Shanaischaraya Namaha. I bow to Saturn. Saturn is leading the way in my chart right now. So I really have to pay attention, which means that I have a close relationship with my chiropractor. I'm going to go and meet my chiropractor very often. I know that, I'm bound to have some mobility issue. If I don't pay attention, I will have a hard time walking, for example, but I need to pay attention to that. So we are in 2026 right now. I'm still in my Saturn Mercury for a while, and we know that Saturn and Mercury have a close relationship for the entire dasha of Saturn. I might be prone to some mobility issue, but I know about it and I can take care of it. So this is just a snapshot of how Vedic astrology can help actually determine any kind of issue. So mobility issue in my case, but it could be any issue with blood sugar, it could be issue with respiratory or allergy problem. And Jyotisha, Vedic astrology, is a fantastic tool to take care of yourself. So I hope it helped. And so please ask me any question. I'm super happy to talk about that. I'm very passionate about it. I love you. I see you.